Well, it has indeed been a remarkable week. Last Saturday, in Tucson, Arizona, a congresswoman, Gabrielle Giffords, was shot by a crazed right-wing fanatic operating in the toxic atmosphere of the foxified mass media in the United States, where every right-winger has a blog or has a foghorn in the form of talk radio. Of course, we have our own foghorns around in this country, but nothing like the foghorns in the United States. Nothing like Rush Limbaugh in the United States, the man who considers President Obama to be a traitor to the country. People like Beck on Fox News, whose list of crazed ravings appear in The Guardian today, and Mr. Murdoch is being asked by a Jewish organisation to dismiss this man from his employ. We'll be talking to John Le Boutillier about the charge that the attempted assassination of the congresswoman and the cruel murder of 6 other people who just happened to be there at the event she had organised outside of Safeway, whether the responsibility lies with the far right in the United States. John Le Boutillier is, of course, a former Republican congressman, and it's the heinous events in Tucson, Arizona. Who's to blame? Just the shooter? Just the 22-year-old who was able to go into Walmart or its equivalent and buy a Glock pistol, automatic, and big stock of hollow-tipped bullets, whilst drooling at the mouth, hearing voices, and snarling at imaginary enemies? That's the United States for you. 08717 223344. That's the number to call. Kevin in Plymouth says, let's hope with her insane talk of a blood libel, Sarah Palin has finally rendered herself unfit for office in the eyes of US citizens. We'll be talking to John Le Boutillier about that very point, and my belief is also that at least the Sarah Palin phenomenon, the Sarah Palin bubble, has now been pricked. And across the pond to John Le Boutillier about the atrocity in Tucson, Arizona, and the toxic fog of right-wing chat and talk out of which it may well have emerged.
We can't let our Constitution and our right to speak freely and to disagree with each other to be another casualty of this terrible, horrific tragedy that occurred over the weekend.
Well, that's Terry Holt, part of the right-wing damage control effort that's been going on all week to try and stop what could turn out to be a political catastrophe for the far right in America, for Sarah Palin and Beck and Fox News and Rush Limbaugh and all the other crazed right-wing fanatics who fill the airwaves of the United States with their toxic and foul hatred, which many believe was exactly the atmosphere from which the shooter in Tucson, Arizona appeared. We'll be talking to the sage John Le Boutillier about that very subject shortly. So, in Tucson, Arizona, you've heard me say this before, there are decades when nothing happens, but there are weeks when decades happen. I believe that such a week has just occurred in the United States. Last Saturday evening, an attack on a congresswoman, Gabrielle Giffords, a Jewish woman, which will become important later in this discourse when we talk about Sarah Palin, was shot in the brain, and 6 other people were murdered, including a young girl born on 9/11. Can you believe it? A child who was born on 9/11 was then shot dead outside Safeways in Tucson, Arizona last Saturday, including an old man of 76 who threw himself on top of his wife to protect her and was killed and lay there dying for 10 minutes as his wife of 50 years talked him into his grave. The judge, federal judge, who had been subject to right-wing death threats because of a stance he'd taken on a case brought by illegal immigrants in Arizona, was another man who lost his life. It was carnage, and it's a carnage that is being contextualized by many as emerging out of the toxic atmosphere that exists in the United States, where every political disagreement is elevated to a life and death matter, and where hatred rules the roost.